And Ole Miss was one of the first two that gave me a really good look and offered me the job. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll do it. I moved sight unseen to Mississippi, which is extremely different than the West Coast.
Yeah.
I had never been to the South like a day in my life, and was like, cool, I can do whatever for 2 years. And kind of packed my bags and got down here the day before I started work and found an apartment online, moved in, and was a graduate assistant here for about 1.5 years. And then partway through my second year as a graduate assistant, a full-time job came open, and applied for it, got it. And I've been here ever since. I've been here for almost 3 years. So it's been awesome. Such a fun ride. Never expected to like it nearly as much as I do. And it's been so much fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a big move and a big jump to just kind of take that sight unseen. Kudos to you for jumping in headfirst like that.
Thanks. It's sometimes I look back and I'm like, how and why did I do that? But it has completely paid off. It's been awesome.
That's great. Yeah, and I know we have a lot of college students who join this, and just good to hear too, like from, being willing to kind of take that opportunity. And with sports, there's going to be opportunities kind of all over the country. So it's always good to kind of have that openness, especially, to get your career started to a place you maybe never thought you'd live or decide to go to. So just a reminder for everyone, Will mentioned it in the chat, but feel free to drop in, any questions or just your name and LinkedIn in the chat if you want. Everyone will connect with each other. But yeah, if you have any questions for Janice, just drop them in and we'll call on you to ask. And we'll take this till about, 2:30, 2:45, depending on how long it goes. So I guess to start, Janice, about kind of Ole Miss, so much of what at least I'm used to is in pro sports. I'd love to hear from you kind of the structure at Ole Miss in terms of social content. It's not just the athletic account or the football account. There's 7 to 10, maybe more accounts. How is that structure set up at Ole Miss? Which accounts are you a part of? And how is that different from maybe how other schools are set up?
Yeah, collegiate sports are very different than pro teams. Pro teams, you have usually one account, maybe a couple different like analytics accounts that are associated. But with college sports, you have your Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts for, 15 different sports that you oversee. And then you have a Maine athletics account that kind of is a hodgepodge of a highlight reel from, baseball and track and field, and kind of sharing the love equally between everybody. So I have played a part in, I think, all but 2 of the 15 sports we have here. And currently I oversee social for baseball, men's and women's golf, volleyball, and then I'm part of our football team, which has a lot of different hands in the pot. But the way social content is produced and posted is very much a team effort. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who've been on here have said that, social media is such a team effort, and there's so many people that play such a great part in collaborating and bouncing ideas off of each other. But the way we work here is that your marketing department, your communications department, and your video department each have one person who is delegated to your sport. And you specifically with your sports information director, you together pretty much tackle social media kind of the best way that you see fit. One of the cool parts of collegiate social media too, I think, is that you get to have a voice for so many different types of programs. Having my hand in anything from, tennis to golf to football, it's fun to have a voice for, for football, and things you post there isn't necessarily the same way you would cater content for a tennis program. So that's been one of my favorite parts of working in college sports, is being able to be a voice for so many different programs and kind of figure out how do you cater different social content, what works well with what kinds of sports, and then how can you help each of those grow.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And it's a totally different mindset of like shifting gears from, even though you're covering the same brand, I guess, under the Ole Miss umbrella, the golf team, I'm sure, has its own personality that you want to dig in on versus the volleyball team versus the baseball team. How do you manage that different voice across the accounts? Are you embedded with those teams as much as possible to kind of learn and that audience?
Yeah, so we work really closely, with coaches and their operations staff, as what they want to see, and what kind of a voice they want. Some sports are really edgy and can kind of have more of the playful tone with it. And it all just kind of depends. I think a lot of that comes from the coaching staff working down. Obviously social strategy is founded within the marketing department, the communications, and all of those external groups who build the best possible thing for a program. But I think a lot of it depends on what kind of a sport it is, and also from the coaches and the staff what they want to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that leads to my next question, which I'm really curious about, is who do you consider kind of your main audience for the content you're putting out there? Is it for the students? Is it for the recruits? Is it for the possible recruiting on the athletic side and education side, the community, all of the above? How do you look at that as kind of who you're speaking to and who you really, really want to engage with?
I think our number one focus is for sure the fans. And I know that fits an array of people, but the fans, whether that be, the students or, prospective students coming in, is really the grounding of everything that makes it so great. And finding ways to create that backstage look at what we do as a program for the fandom. Every fandom is different. Ours traditionally tends to be a little bit older, some of the more, people have been around Oxford their whole life, but there's also such a young demographic, seeing as, working with a college campus, you have people who are just students who care about the university, or are alumni who've cared about the university because they went there. I say definitely the focus on the fans. I think recruiting is also can see a lot of benefit from social media. One thing you can do too, or, coaches will ask if you see a lot of success with the program, you can help recruit athletes being like, hey, our school's in the SEC. These are the kind of engagement numbers we see over a season that puts you at this much exposure to go play in the league, or these are how many people are going to be seeing, the highlight reels from the games and things like that. And kind of giving them leverage to say, hey, when you come here, we're gonna put you on a really good platform that people are going to care about and people are going to engage with and put you in a really good light.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's so many different priorities there versus, the fans, but also how that attracts new potential recruits and students to your school, the current students, which are fans, and then the alumni that really want to stay and keep up with what's going on. And then, of course, the athletes themselves and the departments who I'm sure really care, like you said, about what's going out and how they're being represented. So we have a few questions coming in. Jessica from the NFL. Jessica, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, I'm curious, as you kind of think about the current climate we're in, how are you reimagining your marketing and social strategy to kind of still provide compelling content for Ole Miss fans during this kind of sports hiatus?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something that's been interesting to me, especially, has been looking how so many different teams have approached this hiatus. There's been some teams that have just completely gone radio silent and have not really posted anything. And there's some who I think that really have capitalized on it, and almost being a glimmer of hope for fans. I think, the world situation, especially over the past couple of weeks, can be a dark place on social media sometimes. So I think continuing that relationship with sports or providing ways for fans to connect has been awesome. Some things we've done have been, repurposing old content and old highlights. I work with the baseball program, like I said, so we've been doing a lot of on this days and, on these days in history's really big plays. The SEC network has also been airing a lot of old games. So we've done some live tweeting along with that, kind of getting fans together to watch it. And also doing interviews with players on Instagram Live, giving people things to look forward to. I think, in my personal opinion, I think going radio silent during a time like this is not really a good idea at all. I think it's important to be sensitive to the matter going on at hand, absolutely. But I think sports provides such a unifier in society and brings so many people together, and kind of continuing to foster those relationships and build a fandom is so important.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Lauren, did you want to ask your question, Lauren Reed?
Yeah, so I work in the SEC too. I'm at Tennessee, but one question I had for you is when you moved to Ole Miss, what was that transition like in learning like a new culture and a new program that you weren't super familiar with initially?
Yeah, great question. That was very, very, I wouldn't say it's hard, but it takes a very proactive effort. You know, I think it's the same kind of approach you have going into interviews, is really diving in and doing research on where you're going. You know, Ole Miss has so many traditions, as does Tennessee, and almost every school in the SEC is so grounded in a tradition base, and doing your best to look up what makes those places special and then making your transition the easiest. I think, like I said, just being proactive and looking into it, it's definitely difficult, especially when you think of, you know, working with so many sports and having to learn so many different athletes and who are your stars for each of those 15 sports and how do you brand each of them. It's a lot and it can feel overwhelming, but I think if you just put your best foot forward, do your research, and have a really open mind, I think, you know, it sets you up for a lot of success.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that kind of leads me to a question I had about, you know, a university and how much history it has and how much tradition it has. You know, obviously you had to learn all of that coming in to kind of end up being the voice of the university on social. How much kind of, with so much kind of baked into what Ole Miss is and has been, how much kind of leeway do you get to kind of have fun with the brand in new ways, and who kind of controls the brand from a central standpoint? Or is that something that has kind of a brand manager, or, you know, someone who kind of controls what that messaging is in a way?
I'd say that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I face in my job. We have someone who oversees the brand as a whole. It's not their entire job, but they're the ones, you know, making sure that things across all platforms are cohesive, no matter what that is, depending, just because there's so many hands in the pot, there's someone whose job is to regulate what's going on and making sure that everything's adding up to a really cohesive brand image. But as far as the traditional versus new marketing tactics, that's what I've struggled with, because Boise State is such an, I feel like, very innovative, and they're much newer to the collegiate scene, especially coming on as a powerhouse within our conference. They have a lot more leeway to kind of pave their own way for themselves and make their own voice, where for Ole Miss, there's so much grounded in tradition. You know, you look at our game day traditions and the Grove and different in-game elements. It's hard to figure out what is a traditional element and what is something that is up for change. For baseball, for example, there's a lot of things that are very scripted and that are planned out, and we've done them for years, which is great. And we send out fan surveys at the end of the year, and our fans, one of their number one most valued aspects of our baseball environment at Ole Miss is the traditional elements. And so how do you appease fans by keeping that nostalgic feel of your game day environment, and displaying that over social, but also finding new ways to keep innovating yourself, and providing something new and fresh and keeping up with the times. I don't think there's like a cookie cutter answer for it by any means, but that's something I've struggled with for sure, is finding, you know, how do you captivate the traditions of what we offer here in a new and exciting way.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge, because on one hand, the traditions give you a lot to work with, and a lot to kind of base off of, where on the other, it's, can you stray from them, and how much could you play around with them when people won't get offended, especially maybe some of like the alumni and the folks that have been around who maybe don't want to see that tradition in a new light. So it's kind of an interesting balance you have to play there.
Absolutely. But it's fun, you know, like coming down here and seeing what makes Ole Miss so special is amazing. You know, people get to give their kids the same experience that they got to have growing up, which is awesome. But from a marketing perspective, yeah, it definitely poses its own challenges.
Yeah. Is there one of those traditions that you find the most appealing, or that you like the most? And if so, kind of what is that for folks that may not be familiar with Ole Miss?
Yeah, I'd say for sure mine is the Grove. So in the heart of our campus, there are these really, really old, I think they're oak trees. They're huge, they're massive. And I can't remember how many acres of it, but it's in the heart of campus, and it's like its own little beautiful, lush, green, woodsy area. And on football game day weekends, so we don't actually sell tailgating spots. It's kind of a first come, first serve. And some families camp out and you set up on Friday night. And some people have been getting the same spots for years or whatever. But we, time and time again, are the number one tailgating experience in college athletics. And if you ever just look up videos of it, it is amazing. It's this giant, like, greenery area, but it's filled body to body with people having a good time, and it's right across from the stadium. It's amazing. It's amazing. Since I've moved here, I don't get to enjoy it because I'm always working, but I'm always in the capturing social content, talking to fans, and it's amazing. And then right when the team comes in, we do something called the Walk of Champions, and their buses get parked on the far side of the Grove, and they unload and they walk through the entire Grove, and it's amazing. I'm in the line with all of them, getting content and kind of behind the scenes footage, and it's so much fun. It's amazing. It gives me chills every time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what makes college football so great and so much more personal than pro sports in that way. Kelly Davenport, did you want to introduce yourself and ask that question? If not, I will ask it. It's in the chat there. So Kelly Davenport from the Milwaukee Bucks asked, how do you measure success in your marketing strategies? It looks like her mic isn't working. Sorry, Kelly. Yeah, how do you measure success? And that's definitely a question that comes up a lot on these, and always interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think obviously numbers are important to some extent. To a lot of extents actually. Making sure you're creating good engagement numbers and your content's getting in front of people and people care about what you're posting is important. But I think if you don't have a purpose behind it, that tends to be a problem if you don't have a direction and somewhere where you're going or something you're looking to. So something we focus on here is, how do you tell the story of Ole Miss, and how do you, I think it's more two-part. How do you tell the story of Ole Miss and our student athletes? And then how do you build relationships with fans? One of my old bosses, his name's Michael Thompson, and he's out down at Texas A&M right now. He has this pyramid of fandom, and he always would talk about, how are we moving people up the pyramid? At the very bottom would be people who kind of know about Ole Miss but don't really care, and then it progressively gets more and more intense and more driven with the program and more locked in. So when those hard times come, people still are going to be your ride or die fans. And his big thing is, how do you move people up the ladder, and what can we do, whether it be social content, marketing strategies, to help grow fans into a more devoted fan to your program. So I think those two things, if it's reflecting a positive light on telling your brand's story or one of your athlete stories, or it's helping build a relationship with a fan, I think those two things, if it's meeting those two standards and meeting it well, I think your brand will always find success.
Nicole has a question here, which I'll read because it says she's unable to talk, but she's wondering how you work with your video and comms departments to make sure you're all on the same page and not stepping on each other's toes. And it's a good question, especially with how many different sports and different resources are probably being shared or separated.
Yeah, communication is key. I know people stress that in a lot of different jobs, but within sports especially, we are talking on different types of communication channels all the time, over communicating. When the way we're broken up, though, kind of what I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have one person from each sport, besides football has a lot of hands in the pot, one person from each sport who's dedicated to it. So, we call it our Marcom 3. So there is a, marketing person, a communications person, and then your video production person. And a lot of those Marcom 3s will meet once a week and in person and talk about it. Or, you'll have your own communication channel, whether it be Slack or text or whatever, where you're always sharing content and ideas and what we're doing and building a plan and delegating who's doing what. And then the third way too is by having a calendar. I'm a little OCD and I love keeping track of when things are going out and being able to reflect back on the previous year and say, okay, what did we do here? How did those numbers perform? What can we do better moving forward? But having a calendar of all your social content has helped us, because I'll go on there and I'll see, Alex, our communication guy, is a story releasing at 1 today. I'm going to wait and push my content later tonight around 5. So it's easy ways to be able to make sure you're not posting too close together. Content isn't getting lost, but everything is also being taken care of.
Yeah, that's a whole nother layer of complexity. And it sounds like it always comes back to communication. There's no kind of magic bullet there. Ben, did you want to ask your question if you're able to? If not, I'll ask it for you.
Yeah, I can ask it. So
Cool.
I'm a marketing intern from Duquesne University, which is a smaller school up in Pittsburgh. And so being an intern, I obviously do more like game day operations and doing things during the game day. So I was just wondering what you do for football and baseball as a game day aspect instead of being in the office.
Absolutely. So my job isn't specifically delegated to social. Social is just one part of it. My passion for sure, I think, lies in social media, which will be cool to see how that develops during my career. But I am in the marketing and fan experience department. So we are probably just like what you're doing, designing promotions and providing that game day experience, executing sponsored elements, writing game scripts, taking care of national anthems, first pitches, kind of you name it. I take care of it on game day music, playlists, whatever that be. It definitely falls under my umbrella, and then social media is on top of it. So with baseball, I'm the person who is, calling the game, writing the script, inviting the groups to come, and doing that sort of stuff. But then with football, my primarily role on game day is doing the Instagram stories, which has been so much fun. We started last year a digital intern position, which was so much fun. It kind of helped us better serve all of our sports, because it's hard for everyone to, if you're a communications SID and you're marketing person and you're both, calling a game and doing stats, it's really hard to help keep up with, an Instagram story during the middle of everything that's going on. So our digital interns have provided a lot of help with that, particularly with Instagram stories. So that's my role with football. And then also in game, I'm helping our student run the athletics one, and then also helping with some on-game or on-field recognitions and groups that come down. Kind of a hodgepodge, I guess, is a better way to put it.
Sounds busy.
It is. It's a lot of different pots, which is fun because no 2 days are ever the same. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And so that kind of leads to another question I had, back more specifically towards social. You're talking about all the different sports and how you have to kind of focus different efforts across them and different voices, different styles. And then there's the layer of different platforms. So could you tell us a little bit about, your philosophy or your approach to the different social platforms, whether by sport or just kind of more umbrella? Yeah,
I think the biggest thing that I've personally seen here is the growth of Instagram and how involved our fans have been there. I think across the board on the numbers that I've looked at, Instagram tends to be our most engaged platform for majority of our sports.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I like to say it's my favorite if I were to pick a favorite, but sometimes it's also the most inconvenient. Because a lot of the other platforms allow you to schedule posts and they just kind of happen on their own. You can wipe your hands and be done at 5. But Instagram definitely poses its own challenges as it's way harder to schedule on there. So I think that, Twitter's more of a news feed. Instagram's a highlight reel, and Facebook, in my opinion, is kind of a blend of the both. But there's such different audiences on there. Instagram's so much younger. Facebook is a little bit older. And Twitter, again, is kind of a mix of the two. So just finding content pieces, I think that you can cater to each of those, whether that be resizing a video or cutting it down or turning a video into pictures to use on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Just finding ways to get the same message across, but cater it to each of the platforms.
Yeah. Yeah, that leads to kind of the question of the day that everyone wants to know, and different brands. How are you thinking about or approaching TikTok at Ole Miss?
That is I feel like everyone is struggling with that right now. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. I think, just looking at the numbers that TikTok puts up of video views and such, like their reach is incredible of the amount of people who care about the content that's on there. And it's like common to see, millions of likes on some random kid from Ohio doing a trick shot. It's so interesting to me of how unpredictable it is. We are definitely in the phase of figuring it out, which I think a lot of people are, and figuring out what works, what doesn't. Overly produced content doesn't really traditionally do very well. So, how do you take a new approach to it and create custom content for TikTok? We've created a TikTok as of now for our football account and baseball. Our baseball one has done really, really well. We're actually the most followed Collegiate TikTok baseball account in the NCAA, which is exciting. But now it's also figuring out, what do you do with that? You have this new platform of really young kids, which is also interesting, of the different reach it has to attract a completely different target group. What do you do with that? So we're still definitely figuring it out. We're trying it, and I think, it poses a lot of opportunities, but yeah, definitely figuring it out.
Yeah, as pretty much every brand is. But that's really interesting that baseball and football, the baseball one seems to be taking off. Obviously, just knowing that platform and that how young it skews and how that sport may skew a little older. Do you have an explanation for that, or a theory as to why the baseball one is doing so well?
I think part of it could be because they were in season. Also, our baseball team is very, very connected with our fans, and very personable. After every game, fans are welcomed on the field for autographs and whatever. And the relationships they have with our fans, people care so much about that team. They also have had a lot of success, but I think part of it could be being in season. And the other thing too is they're willing to do so much goofy stuff. The football one hasn't really had a prime opportunity, I would say, to take off. It was created during quarantine. So, we haven't had the opportunity to create a lot of custom content we did for baseball. But our baseball guys are also so willing to do anything. They've done remakes of some stuff. They have ideas. And they're the ones coming to us a lot of the time. They're like, hey, we want to do this kind of a thing. Can we make it happen? And which has been so helpful too, because, it's the first social platform that's made me feel old, which sometimes is so humbling, because, when it plays such a big part in your career, you're like, okay, cool, I got this. You're learning the tricks of the trades. Things are ever evolving, but it's the first one that I had to ask someone to help me with. And it's been interesting.
Yeah. That's great to think. And hopefully that, as athletes from the younger generation grow up, they feel ownership in the brand account and want to make it better as it's representing them. And that's got to be a boon to the content that, if they're coming up with content ideas for you and are willing to kind of take it to that level, I'm sure that shines through.
Absolutely. They're very creative, I'll tell you that. They have so many good ideas. So that's been really fun to kind of work with them almost to execute it, and that they've bought completely into the platform. A lot of them had their own personal ones beforehand, and they were like, we've got to make this one great. So it's been awesome to have such buy-in from your athletes, which sometimes can be the hardest part.
Yeah, definitely. Kelly, I'll ask you a question here because I know your mic is broken. What are your favorite, most productive ways of brainstorming with your team?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know how creative this is in more of a professional realm. But for me, one of my favorite things to do is ask people who don't work in the creative wing ideas on a project. Sometimes I'll ask people who don't necessarily work with baseball on an idea about something, like, hey, what do you think about this that we're trying to do? And, they'll definitely give me really good ideas, and kind of getting ideas from people you maybe necessarily wouldn't. Sometimes I'll walk down the hall. Our water fountain's all the way on the other side of the building. And sometimes I'll pop in and, ask people ideas on different stuff. Because I think that, sometimes you get in the rhythm of doing things and things become stale, or you're kind of at a wall. But some really good ideas we've had have come from people who don't necessarily work in the creative wing, just because, we're like, we have this route and we don't know where it's going. So I think, definitely reaching out has been fun for me to be able to see different people kind of share their ideas and help create with us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to get ideas from outside. Sometimes you look at it so much and the social account so much that things kind of get repetitive. Looks like Will just pasted in the Ole Miss baseball TikTok account. So we hit
Oh,
about
very cool. Check it
20
out.
new followers.
Our coach has even bought in. Our most recent one was of our coach, Coach Bianco, who's been here for 20 years, dropping in on a Zoom meeting of our Friday night pitcher. And it was his class, and he was like, we obviously scripted it, obviously, but it was a really cool idea where he even bought into TikTok, and him at his age was like, yeah, cool, I'll help you guys make some, which was fun.
That's awesome. I have a question about, the different accounts internally and also say within the SEC. It's pretty popular, especially in the NBA, and I think it's been carried over to some other pro sports, NHL for sure, where accounts kind of tweet at each other and have that kind of banter and conversation. Do you do that within the Ole Miss accounts, like baseball to football to volleyball? And also, does that happen in university circles, like amongst SEC football accounts, for example?
Totally. Something we do with like rain delays, for example, with baseball, we like tweet at the other school and play Connect Four or something like that, and just find ways to keep engaging people. Or in quarantine, I know our tennis accounts did something with the teams we were supposed to be playing on those days, where they created some interaction between the two platforms. I don't think we do more of the goofy content where we cross share. But we definitely help promote each other. So whether that be in venue or on social media, we help share pieces or kind of promote relevant content. We also have two sport athletes who play football and baseball. So that's also kind of fun too, to kind of help co-brand the two together through the link of those two athletes has been fun. Or help share, like really big highlights that someone has at the plate to the football account to be like, hey, look what they're doing at baseball. So definitely help share, but I say more of the stat-based or game content from each other's platforms.
Nice. Claire, do you want to unmute, introduce yourself, and ask that question?
Yeah, so I'm Claire. I'm with Iowa State Athletics. Kind of along the same lines, does your marketing department run the Maine Athletics account as well? And how do you decide what content you want to post on the Maine account versus the team accounts?
Totally. Great question. I'll be very transparent. Our Maine account really needs some love. And I think that might be one of our it's something that we're definitely looking into approaching, especially for next year. There isn't necessarily a direct ownership. It's kind of more when something really big happens in your sport, whether that be, golf or whatever, we share it to the Maine Athletics page. But I think there's a lot that we can do more to help engage fans and kind of help get exposure for some of our smaller programs on such a big stage. So it's housed within our communications and marketing department. Everyone kind of has access to it to utilize how they see fit. But I think, especially coming up to the next year, that's one of my big babies that I want to help take on and help kind of make more than what it is right now. Great question, though.
So this question came early on from Matthew Berry before everyone even hopped on, and I think he's since had to hop off. But he had a question specific to, and I know it's super new and you probably don't really know yet the situation, but how do you think NIL and kind of the new rules coming out may impact how you manage social media with players? Is that something that has been talked about, or is it so new that that's not even kind of something that's been addressed yet?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. It's still so new. It's not necessarily something we've talked about yet. And I think that definitely will be a larger scale decision than myself for sure. But sure. Yeah, I'm definitely curious to kind of see where things go and how that plays an impact on social, especially at the collegiate level.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for a few more questions here. Is there a project or campaign specifically that kind of you're proudest of since your time at Ole Miss? And if so, kind of why?
Good question. I think the one I'd probably attribute the most to is seeing the growth with our baseball account. I know that's really vague, but with baseball, this is my second year running it from a marketing standpoint. And our SID, Alex, is really passionate about social media too. And so me and him together, I love working with him. He's really great at his job. And me and him wanted to tackle social and to help drive our social platforms for the next year. So after our first year together, we're like, okay, let's dive in. What worked? What didn't? What do people care about? How do we get people excited about the season? And we've seen really, really good growth numbers. We're actually the School Sparks, I'm sure a lot of people follow it, where they give you the ratings of where you fall within interactions. Just on Instagram, we were the most engaged social media or NCAA baseball team per post, which is cool because the next two were Vandy and LSU, who have twice as many followers as we do. So it's very fun to see your strategies kind of come back full circle and be fruitful with, the kind of content you're putting out and how you are doing a year-long strategy. We've seen a lot of growth too. I mean, our team was really successful this year and had a great winning streak. And so we saw a lot of growth with our numbers. But, it also kind of translated to the business side of things. We have a really great ticket office who sells tickets in our foundation, who is making calls and working with donors, which is amazing. It's such a team effort. But the last 2 years, we've also broken season ticket records and have helped push that on social. So it's cool to see how much success I think, social can have with growing your following and growing your engagement. And kind of it's fun to see something that you've kind of taken as your baby kind of evolve to what it's becoming. So I know it's a really vague answer, but I think that's probably something I'm most proud of.
No. Yeah, that's very, very specific, I think, and very, very cool that you get to kind of see it grow and, especially with the team performing well, get to fully take advantage of that moment in time. And then you get to keep those fans for a long time after that.
Yeah.
Last question here that I will ask. As a connected fan, what's the best piece of sports content that you've recently consumed, whether it be on social or otherwise, or just accounts that you've kind of followed to kind of stay up to date with stuff?
I think that different NBA teams, whether that be the Bulls or whoever, capitalizing on content from The Last Dance has been so fun for me to watch. I mean, The Last Dance itself has been so great to see. It is such an incredible production. I know we talked about at the beginning of this of how almost ahead of time they were by giving that kind of an access to a team back in their day. So it's been so cool to see what ESPN's doing. And I feel like every commercial break, I'm like on my phone scrolling through Twitter, trying to see what people are saying, looking at all the memes that are almost instantly created. So I think what teams, ESPN, and everyone involved has done with The Last Dance has been amazing and knocked it out of the park. But as far as other accounts I follow or really, really enjoy, I think LSU has done an incredible job capitalizing on their team success this year and helping to brand them and really, really grow themselves. I really admire them. Clemson Athletics is also really, really good. They have an awesome social media department. So seeing what they do is great. And then Ohio State football is also really interesting to me. I would highly recommend looking into all of these if you guys haven't. Ohio State's football's Instagram is so unique to me. Traditionally, graphics don't always perform as good or heavily graphical content. I feel like for us on Instagram hasn't seen as much success. Some stuff for sure, but their stuff is very graphical and they do so well. It's so interesting to me. I feel like they're so unique in what they do. So I think those are all different programs I kind of look to and admire within the collegiate realm.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we're at the 45-minute mark, so I don't want to take up any more of your time than what was committed. Thank you so much, Janice, for joining us, and thanks to everyone who tuned in and asked questions.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. It's been so much fun.
Cool. So yeah, we'll leave this on for anyone who wants to linger, ask any more questions of us. And next week we have Megan Ryan on, not the actress, but the director of digital and social media for the San Francisco 49ers. So she'll be on to talk about social media and marketing for the Niners.
Well, you guys have had such a good lineup, I feel like. Like, I watched everybody's, and I'm like, this is amazing. This is so good.
You're part of it.
It's been fun.
It's amazing. It's so cool. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me. This has been awesome. Is there any other questions we can get to?
Let's see. The one question that came in at the end there was from Ben about, he said, Ole Miss is known for football and baseball. How do you also help grow the smaller Olympic sports?
Totally. It's also a really good question. It's definitely, I wouldn't say more difficult, but it can be. I think it's finding what make each of those special or finding unique stories to tell from within. I think there's always going to be a unique athlete that's on one of those teams, whether that be, golf or tennis or track, and kind of finding a way to connect the fan with the players. And in really looking for those unique stories. Our video department's really, really talented. They do this episode called The Season, and it's very much long form video. Football, it's every single week after our game, and then each of the other sports get at least one, sometimes more, depending on what sport you are. But it dives into a game recap of, really big game the coaches want to focus on, and taking the fan pretty much through that entire experience. And then it'll also feature student athlete profiles in it about different unique stories, whether that be, their upbringing, where they came from, or something that's happened to them that's impacted their life, or something they're doing here. If you haven't looked at them, I'd really recommend looking at just The Season at Ole Miss. They've won Emmys for it. It's amazing how talented our video department is at storytelling. And I think that's a really unique way that we found a lot of success in humanizing our other smaller sports through the season. People get really connected, with the stories that they hear and what goes on there. So
yeah,
my answer for that.
Yeah, it's all about kind of access. And it's great that, you have a team that can kind of tell those personal stories. Is that being distributed on YouTube primarily, or is that on SEC Network too?
It actually got picked up by ESPNU last year. So
nice.
our football episodes went out on ESPNU on, I can't remember what day, I think it was Fridays. Don't quote me on that, but it's also on YouTube, and then we air it on Facebook, and then obviously push it to all of our different platforms. And it's really, really incredible what they do. My mind is always blown at what our video department does and how they create stories and how they tell stories. It's amazing, because anything, from football to basketball to any of your other sports, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. It doesn't seem like there's anything else. Anything else you want to talk about?
This has been fun though. I really appreciate it. This has been great. And if anyone ever has any questions about, what I do or need to ask for advice or whatever, I'm always here to listen or answer what I can.
Cool. Yeah. After this, we'll send out an email to everyone with the link. We'll clip this off and put it on YouTube and then on our blog. So send everyone the link for those who didn't make it. And then also just your LinkedIn and Twitter, so folks could follow you and connect with you there and ask any lingering questions. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for the time again. And we will be in touch soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Janice. Thanks, everyone.
Great staying on Zoom. Bye.
All right. Bye.